Good morning. Welcome back to the Red Mic. Today's Red Mic message, I'm going to be the boy who cried internet. No, not wolf. Yesterday, I told you a story about Cliff Burton and his father, Ray, and we talked about how the version that was viral is usually bigger than the truth. Not necessarily fake, not fabricated, but definitely stretched, polished, turned up just enough to make it go viral. Once you see that, you can't unsee it because now every time you scroll, you start asking questions. Is that really true? Did that really happen? And what's being left out? And that is a good instinct. It's called discernment. But this is not the first time we talked about that. You might remember, if you've been with me from the start, way back, Red Mike message, April Fool's Day 2024, I used this phrase, be skeptical, not cynical. And I tied that back to Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. Those two things, they go together, I think. Curiosity says, I want to understand this better. Judgment says, I've already decided what this is. Skepticism says, I'm going to check this before I believe it. It's the doubting Thomas in all of us. Cynicism says, I don't believe any of that. There's your payoff pitch. Because when you see stories like the Cliff Burton story, they push you right up against that line. You see the exaggeration, you recognize the sizzle, and then you got a choice. You can stay skeptical or you can slide into cynicism. And this is not anything new. This didn't start with social media. You may remember some of these things because we've all heard them, and nobody knows who started these things. Some of the facts that you grew up hearing. We only use 10% of our brain. Goldfish have a 3-second memory. Sorry, Ted. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. All of those sound just sciency enough to believe, to think that they're true. And they've been repeated so many times that they feel true. They're not. At least not the way they're told. And here's the interesting thing. Again, nobody sat in a room and said, let's create a bunch of lies and spread them and get people to believe them. A good story outran the truth. It got repeated, it got simplified, it got cleaned up, and it became something that people could remember, repeat, and pass along. Same thing happened with that Cliff Burton story. Same thing happens every day on your feed. Now, if you realize all of that and you stop at, well, I guess nothing is true, you've gone too far because you've crossed the line. You've gone from skeptical to cynicism. Cynicism sounds like, well, I'm sure there's more to the story. That didn't happen like that. That's probably exaggerated, and nothing on the internet is real anyway. That's a defense mechanism. And I understand. I really do. I mean, look at your spam box every day and realize that there's people who actually click on those things. And you've seen headlines that don't match the story, viral posts that fall apart after 2 minutes of research, stories that leave out just enough to change the meaning. So your brain adapts. Because remember, you know, two movies on the same screen. You got the whole Dunning-Kruger effect. You got all of these things working in your head, right? And you might be tempted to go, well, if I can't trust everything, I'm not going to trust anything. And yeah, that feels smart. It feels safe, but you're not just filtering out the bad then, you're also filtering out the good. You don't just reject exaggeration. You're rejecting the possibility of something being real. And what happens then is you shrug. So, the viral version of that Ted Burton story, yeah, it was oversold, but the core was there. Father was dealing with loss and he quietly chose to help other people. That's the real thing. But if your first reaction is, yeah, but how much did he really give? You're not being skeptical, you're being cynical, and you've moved from curious to judgmental. That shift doesn't just affect how you read stories. It affects how you live. It affects how you lead. It affects how you interact with everybody in your life. Because if you become the person who questions everything, believes nothing, assumes the worst, you don't become wise. You become hard to follow, hard to deal with. Cynicism in the workplace, it's going to kill things. It's going to kill collaboration. It's going to kill trust. It's going to kill momentum. Nobody wants to build something with somebody or work with somebody who already thinks that none of this is going to work and it's all going to be a bad idea. And I've talked about those kind of people before because you probably have that person who, walks in with that continual, wrinkle over them and they're going, that's not going to work. People are out for themselves. That's reality. Gordon Gekko was not wrong ultimately, but being out for yourself 100% all the time and being part of something bigger are not mutually exclusive. You can want to succeed personally and still contribute to a team. You can still build something meaningful and still do the right thing. If you're cynical though, you're going to think everybody's out for themselves, so nothing is real. Skepticism says people have motives. I need to understand them. Got to have those different approaches. So yes, be skeptical, ask questions, look deeper, but don't take everything at face value. But at the same time, don't become cynical. Don't assume the worst. Don't dismiss everything. Don't let your guardrails become a prison, because the goal is not to believe everything and it's not to believe nothing. It's to be able to say, okay, yeah, I see the exaggeration, but I also see that kernel of truth inside it. That's your curiosity. That's discernment. And that's good leadership, because the world doesn't need more people who can tear things apart. It needs more people who can find the truth and then actually do something good with it. Even if it's small, even if it doesn't go viral, even if there's no sizzle, because the real stuff rarely sizzles, but it still matters. That's today's Red Mike message. Hope you found it interesting or helpful. I hope you're able to put some of these things in place in your own life. I really do. And if you're new, welcome. If you've been here a while, thank you for coming back. I really appreciate you guys so very much. By the way, happy tax day. I love you guys. And until next time, don't forget, as always, life is short. Drink the bourbon. I'll see you.